nervous because I'm here now.
Hey guys, welcome into another episode of 410 Sports Talk. James Haskell here with my co-host Glenn Martin and a familiar face, Matthew Stevens from the Ravens Wire, who's become a good friend of the show. Matt, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Always a pleasure to do this and talk football with you guys.
Absolutely. We have been getting really excited about the start of the season. It's been inching closer, as have our viewers, getting a lot of activity, a lot of questions. So we're glad to have an insider's point of view to help answer some of the questions we've been getting. So, Glenn, I'll let you kick it off right off the bat.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, Matt. Now, I got to talk about the recent departure of Mr. Earl Thomas, but I mainly want to focus on the impact it has on the field. How do you think this changes their strategy, if at all, and what are your early impressions of Deshaun Elliott?
Well, I mean, whenever you get rid of a Pro Bowl player and a guy that likely going to make his way into the Hall of Fame, it's going to sting. I don't care what the Ravens say. I don't care what the players say. I don't care what us pundits say. They're going to feel it. There's no way around it, and especially when you're going with a guy who, 2 years in the league, and Deshaun Elliott, he's missed both of those seasons on injured reserve. He's only played 6 games. So, as great as he might be playing right now, and as great as he's practiced so far, he's not going to have the decade of experience Earl Thomas had. He's not going to have the consistency Earl Thomas had. So those things, I mean, they're going to be felt. Now, what they might do to try to improve those areas with Deshaun Elliott in there is maybe just go ahead and send him after the football a little bit more often and not have him try to outsmart quarterbacks like they did with Earl Thomas. Leave that role more to Chuck Clark. And again, you use Deshaun Elliott as a heat-seeking missile effectively, which is what I've called him, since Baltimore drafted him. You go, that guy has the ball. Make sure he doesn't have the ball any longer. And that's just what you do with him.
See ball, get ball.
Yeah. Exactly. So that would be my guess is what they do there. And they'll kind of increase his I don't want to say liabilities, but his responsibilities as the course of the season goes on, and as they feel a little bit more comfortable with him taking on more of those responsibilities, that will happen. But again, I think at this point, you have him out there because he's super athletic. He is a smart football player. He has been around the team for 2 years, and you can use him effectively on that front. But it's going to be a pretty dramatic change from Earl Thomas to Deshaun Elliott. Luckily, you got Marlon Humphrey, a Pro Bowl cornerback. You got Marcus Peters, an all-pro cornerback. You've got Tavon Young back and healthy. You've got Jimmy Smith, who, when healthy and at the top of his game, is a Pro Bowl cornerback for his own right. So maybe those guys are going to have to play a little bit more on an island. They're not going to have quite the same safety net behind them as they did with Earl Thomas, but maybe Marcus Peters gets burned a little bit more often because he's gambling and some things happen. And again, he doesn't have Earl Thomas to help kind of clean him up from behind. But at the end of the day, things are going to change, but I don't think that much by the end of the season.
Nice. Well, that's good to hear because that's definitely a concern that Glenn and I had as soon as the release happened because, like you said, as much confidence as they want to instill in the idea that there's just going to be a smooth transition, it's not going to go that way. Yeah. So one thing that we wanted to talk to you about is the interesting position that the Ravens are in. In some ways, Eric DeCosta has to feel a little bit like a kid in a candy store right now, right? Like he has, I think, a little bit under $17 million or so in cap space, according to Over the Cap. I think it's like 16.4 or 16.8, somewhere around there. So do you expect them to add anyone else to the team with the remaining cap space? A guy that, as a shameless plug, we're getting a lot of traction on our Clowney video. And so that's a guy that's been linked, and we have some thoughts there. But what are your thoughts on having that space and how they'll utilize it?
Well, I'm sure they're going to add some guys. It's probably not going to be anybody of Clowney's stature. At least not at this point in the season. You also have to remember that, this is a condensed off season. It took Earl Thomas really not only the whole off season, but a good half of the year to just digest Baltimore's playbook. And, maybe he was getting car washes, maybe he was doing other things and wasn't digesting it as well as he should have. But this is a complex defense, and you can't expect a guy, it doesn't matter how talented he is, Clowney is, to step in 10 days before the season, 9 days before the season, digest the entire playbook, and be worth whatever you're going to pay him. So those top dollar guys that are still available out there, probably not going to come to Baltimore. Baltimore at this point has to feel pretty confident, and we've got the guys that we've got. Maybe if someone comes available via trade closer to the deadline, you keep that money available so that way you can land Marcus Peters for a 5th-round pick and Kenny Young. Those types of things happen, but you also have to take a look at next year where the salary cap could potentially actually decrease by a significant bit. Being able to roll into next season 10, 15, nearly $20 million into next season could seriously help Baltimore be at the top of the game in terms of the salary cap, which means all those guys that are going to get cut by the teams, a good half the league that is actually below the salary cap next year, if it falls to $175 million. Baltimore now gets to go ahead and sweep that all up and go, 1-year deals for all of you. We're going to pay you vet minimums. We're handing out those deals all day long. That's cool. In order for those guys to then sign a year later when hopefully the salary cap is kind of rebounded. So it makes far more sense for the Ravens to just hold on to that cap space. And if something crazy comes available, that's it. But otherwise, this is a team that should have gotten you to a Super Bowl last year, at least the AFC Championship. You don't need to add anybody crazy at this point.
All right, fair enough. Well, one position that I think has, kind of had me and James pretty curious here is the center position. It looks like Skura is trying to get back out there, but I find it hard to believe he's going to be ready week 1, and he may start the season on PUP. So I don't know if I'm comfortable with Macari being out there, but it looks like he might be the only option because we're hearing Powers just throwing the balls over the quarterback's head. Shockingly, we're still not hearing Bozeman give much of a look, despite the fact that he was an All-American in Alabama and showed he could definitely play left guard. What do you think ends up happening in this center position that looks a little uncertain right now?
Well, with Baltimore, the injury talk is always going to be under like a weird veil for this team, despite the fact that, look, everyone knows kind of what's happening with a lot of these injuries and a lot of these playbooks and things like that. You're seeing more and more teams just keep it all their cards hidden. Everything's a game of poker. Everything's a game of chess. So the reports out of training camp and even at scrimmage were that Skura actually played relatively well. He got a decent number of snaps. Is he going to be at 100%? No, but is him at maybe 80% better than Macari at 100%? Yeah, we'll see. Just like we had last year with left guard, where they didn't announce who their starting left guard was going to be until week 1, and Bozeman was the guy, and then he stayed that guy the entire season. Center's going to be the same thing, and you're right. It really is between Patrick Macari and Matt Skura at this point. My feeling and my understanding of Matt Skura's injury is that he's actually done a fantastic job of getting ready in time. He's held his own in training camp, but again, you have Macari there as a backup. You also have Ben Bredesen there as a potential backup. You also have Bradley Bozeman as a potential backup there. That those guys can play that position if you need to in a pinch, if they decide to not keep Macari for this season. And Skura is just, after 2-3 games, he's feeling it a little bit more. That could certainly be the case. But I think the Ravens' goal is to have Matt Skura out there week 1. He's their best center by far.
Man, I'm just perplexed by that. It's hard for me I'm the type of person that doesn't let things go easily. And I'm just so confused why Bozeman never, as an All-American center coming out of Alabama,
bigger, stronger. I mean, even if Skura is healthy, there's no way he was able to weight train and he was already undersized as a center. So, I mean, there's no way he was able to get stronger than pre-injury. I don't think already. I mean, it just worries me that they're going in there even slighter than they were last year at the same position when they were already slight there, last year. But
yeah, it's absolutely a concern, and I'm actually a little bit shocked that Baltimore didn't do more this offseason to address it. I mean, there were some centers flying around both in the draft and free agency that made a ton of sense if you're not entirely sure about Skura. And that's kind of what gives me the feeling that they really feel that Skura is there. And in what we've seen out of him this offseason from weight training, the dude was lifting weights no problem there toward the end. He was squatting. He was doing everything he needed to do. So, yeah, while a little undersized, it's not like a guard or a tackle where size is the most paramount thing. It's that football intelligence. He needs to be able to pick out reads. He needs to be able to pick out where the coverage needs to go, where the assignments need to be for the offensive line, as well for the quarterback and running back. So those are kind of his primary job, which is why you typically see the super smart guys, the Matt Burks, those types of players get into that role, despite maybe not being as big as your guards, your tackles are. Especially for the Ravens, I think they'll take a smart guy over a big guy there all day long and just let their behemoths of left and right guards kind of just chip in and make sure that Skura or whoever the center isn't overwhelmed on any specific play.
Yeah, hopefully Bredesen transitions that role. If you're talking about intelligence, the dude's, different, from a different planet. So one of the things we also wanted to know is we want to get a little bit of your opinion and based on the information you've been able to garner based on Dez Bryant. I think some people were surprised he left Baltimore without a contract. I know that I'm not a Cowboy fan, never have been a Cowboy fan, but I was on the Dez train. I wanted him to come to the Ravens and work out, have it be successful and get a contract. But do you take the fact that it didn't work out that way as a compliment to the current wide receivers? Or do you think that the workout didn't go that well?
Well, I whenever guys are brought in for workouts, certainly big names like Dez Bryant, for that matter, who's been out of football for a little bit, and for a starting wide receiver who is over the age of 30, that's a huge blow. Sometimes guys are brought in strictly as we like you, we're fans of yours, we're friends of yours. We'll give you a tryout, and maybe that'll draw interest for some other teams. That's where, the Ravens being connected to some guys that never make any sense, that never end up coming to fruition. A lot of that is we're going to do this agent a favor because he's going to get an extra $3 million signing with the Giants because we're supposedly interested and, they're going to up their price. So some of it's probably that. Some of it's also, where does Dez fit in on this team? I just like you, like the idea of Dez Bryant if he is in solid shape, and if he is a guy who is willing to take that, look, you're going to be a rotational wide receiver type of a role as a backup behind like Miles Boykin, for instance, and playing that type of a role. I like that. But at the same time, you have to think about the development of guys like Duvernay, who could play on the outside as well. Miles Boykin, again, you're taking snaps away from him just by having Dez Bryant on the team. And then on top of it, Dez Bryant, throughout his career, not exactly known for being a guy that is cool not catching passes, not playing a whole lot of snaps. Maybe he's turned the corner on that. He said he's matured, but you better believe Baltimore did every bit of homework, looked into who he's hanging out with, looked into where he's been at, did a lot of the necessary research to figure out, has Dez changed or has Dez said he changed? Some of those things I think all factor in, and when it all adds up, Dez Bryant just doesn't make a ton of sense here, at least in the eyes of Baltimore. Maybe that changes if Miles Boykin struggles early in the season or a guy gets hurt. Maybe they kind of keep him on the back burner and say, hey, we're willing to bring you in the second half of the season when you don't need to go through 16 games of wear and tear. We can go ahead and use you at your fullest for 8.
Yeah, and that would make some sense, because I think you're right when you say Boykin. If they say they were using this as a message to send to the current players, which is also a possibility, bringing in a well-known vet, I think that message would only be received from Miles Boykin, because he's the only guy who he poses a threat to. I mean, he's the so maybe Boykin has stepped it up since the Dez talk and made it less necessary. But I want to move to kind of a position that I don't think it doesn't get a lot of love, but the third quarterback spot seems to be kind of up for grabs between Tyler Huntley and Trace McSorley. Could Huntley be that undrafted guy this year that keeps the streak alive for the Ravens and unseats Trace for that third spot?
No one's talking about that third quarterback battle except for apparently us. You're 100% right. My last 53-man roster prediction has Huntley making this team over McSorley, and the reason why I have that is because not only is he making the most plays between the two of them in training camp, which is a huge thing. McSorley had a full year on this roster. He had a full offseason this offseason. If he can't outplay an undrafted free agent who was just trying to go ahead and get drafted 6 months ago, that doesn't exactly bode well for his development. And if you're Baltimore, your third quarterback is a guy that you're going to keep on this roster this year because Robert Griffin probably isn't going to re-sign here next year. He's on the final year of his deal. He's been adamant that he wants a shot at a starting job. He's certainly not getting it here in Baltimore unless Lamar Jackson, God forbid, gets hurt. So you need a backup. You need a young backup who can do a lot of the things Lamar Jackson does. Both McSorley and Huntley, very athletic. If you look at their 40-yard dash times, essentially identical. A lot of their stats are identical in terms of those things, but where Huntley exceeds McSorley is accuracy. He's not going to go ahead and beat you with a 90-yard pass down the field, but he is going to pick you apart for like a 73% completion percentage. That's where Baltimore would really need a guy. If Lamar Jackson goes down, I don't need you to win a game. I need you to not lose it. And that means throwing it to my guys only and not to the other team. Huntley's going to be your guy there. And if you feel confident that he can grow from this year to next year, I don't know why you would keep McSorley, who's proven that he maybe hasn't grown as much as the Ravens would have liked. And the fact they brought in competition at all and that it's even discussion at this point really, I think, goes to helping Huntley out quite a lot. Of course, familiarity is a big thing for this team. That continuity is a huge thing. And if Baltimore feels more confident in McSorley simply because he was been on the team for a year and they know what he's going to give them, I can certainly see the Ravens choosing that end too. But if it were me, based on what I know, Huntley's the guy that I have making this team over McSorley.
Wow, that's interesting, and that's exciting for me. Of course, I think in a lot of regular years, I think Huntley gets drafted. I think the biggest thing that pushed him down on the lot of draft boards was not his play, but it was injury concerns. He had a couple lingering injuries in college, and I think if people got a good look at him, that would have raised his stock or price as far as getting drafted in a regular year. So I think we got lucky in picking up a guy like that. But my question is about the running back room. Every day I feel like on Twitter and Facebook, wherever we look, everyone's talking about JK, right? And he's looking good, talking trash, playing hard. So my question to you is they're coming out every day. Is there any way that the Ravens break camp and their number one running back is J.K. Dobbins, or does it take time for him to unseat Ingram throughout the season?
It's going to take time. I mean, they've got Mark Ingram, who's been in this league for quite a few years, has performed at a high level, including last year. There's no reason why Ingram gets kicked out of that spot unless he's hurt for some reason. At the same time, starters, I mean, I think we've discussed this before. Just because you're labeled a starter doesn't mean anything. Brandon Carr was labeled a starter for 16 games last year, and I think he had something to the effect of like 20% of the defensive snaps. It means nothing on this team. So my guess is they're going to split time early on. The key there is, can Dobbins show that he can be an effective third down back? Can he do positive things in pass blocking? Can he go ahead and pick up the small third and twos that the Ravens are going to need him to do? Can he catch the ball out of the backfield and not put the ball on the field? Those are the small things that he's done well in training camp. Training camp is training camp. The regular season is the regular season, and running backs are kind of a dime a dozen. So you don't give a guy the ball until he's proven he deserves to have the ball like that. However, I do go back to 2000 with Jamal Lewis. He didn't start over top of Priest Holmes, yet by the end of the season, he was the guy. Priest Holmes was clearly out. It was clearly going to be Jamal Lewis's job, and I kind of see the similar thing happening here. Now, of course, if Dobbins doesn't perform well this season, if he struggles at times and they don't feel confident in him in year two, then maybe Mark Ingram sticks around. But certainly this is the guy that maybe takes Mark Ingram's job next year just as a salary cap casualty thing. So getting him the snaps early this season and letting him maybe transform and develop into that starting role is, my guess, going to be the Ravens' ultimate goal from that position this year.
Now, really quickly, before we ask a question on the defense side of the ball, this is Glenn and I have this thing about Justice Hill, and the ongoing debate because there's perceived value, his draft position, stuff like that. So, based on what you've seen in camp, I have two questions. What have you seen out of Gus to solidify his position on the team? Do you think he's a bubble guy right now, or do you think he's pretty solidly on the team? And same thing for Justice.
Fans are going to hate me for this. There's no way around it because everyone loves all these running backs. I think we've talked about it before too, where you look at what these guys do. Gus Edwards, almost exclusively an inside power back. That's what he does. I think out of the 133 rushing attempts last year, something to the effect of like 8 were outside the tackles, or like a ridiculously small number. And then you circle in even further on that, and it's like 110 out of the 133 were between the guards. So it's like you know where he's running if he gets the football. It's behind right guard, behind left guard, or behind the center. That's where he's going. J.K. Dobbins does it just as well, clearly throughout training camp. Mark Ingram does it just as well. He's been doing it his entire career. Why do you need Gus Edwards, who doesn't catch the football, who isn't really the greatest blocker in the backfield? What value does he bring to you other than just depth? And at this point, depth is great, but you've got a second-round pick. You got Mark Ingram. Those are your 2 guys that are going to split carries. And then you keep a guy maybe like Justice Hill who can do some other things. And in a pinch, if both Dobbins and Ingram go down, I mean, you're kind of screwed, let's be real. But maybe you go ahead and throw Justice Hill in there. All right, cool. At least he can carry the football and you bring in some other guys. That's my thought process. At the same time, Justice Hill, you look at him. What does he do? Well, he's an outside runner. That's primarily it. He 3.9 yards per carry last year. Not great. He caught 8 balls for 70 yards. Not great. Why would you keep him when Ingram catches the ball out of the backfield? Dobbins catches the ball out of the backfield. So it's kind of the same boat for each of them. It's just a matter of maybe what flavor of ice cream do the Ravens want this week or this year? What guy do maybe they have confidence in long term? And that's where I lean more toward keeping Hill, who 4th-round draft pick. You got him on a rookie contract for 4 years. He's affordable. Gus Edwards, he's on that ERFA deal right now, so you've got an RFA deal for him next year. That's going to cost you a little bit more. And again, running backs dime a dozen, like we discussed earlier. I cannot see this team carrying 4 running backs when you need more depth in the defensive line. You need more than 4 pass rushers at outside linebacker. You got 3 linebackers right now at inside linebacker. You just lost Earl Thomas. You could use to keep an extra safety. Nigel Warrior's playing well. Geno Stone is your 7th-round pick. You'd probably like to keep him too. There's so many other areas where you need depth that having 4 running backs is kind of a weird luxury that the Ravens don't need. Certainly, again, I think if you look at Edwards, 3 power running backs, definitely a luxury that 31 out of 32 teams are going to laugh at and think it's stupid. Baltimore might be the only team that goes, yep, that's our secret sauce. I don't know, man. It's a tough one, but I would not be shocked if the Ravens cut either Hill or Edwards, or maybe try to trade him here at the roster cut down for a late round pick if they can.
Yeah. That's it. Well, let's go over to the other side of the ball to, as you call it, the running back of the defense. And let's talk about the middle linebacker position. I got to know, is it going to be Queen and Fort to start the year, or does Harrison somehow make it into the starting rotation, even though they just paid for it? But it sounds like Harrison's been making his name. He's been making some plays out there, picked off Lamar for the first interception, albeit from a tip. But, yeah, how's it start? Is it Queen and Fort, Queen and Harrison?
I think it's going to be Queen and Fort. Again, you go with the guy that has the more experience, and you let your rookie develop into that role. That being said, Harrison is severely underrated as a cover linebacker. He's a big guy. He can thump. He's going to go ahead and lay the wood at some point this season. We're going to get that highlight. But don't sleep on him in terms of a coverage linebacker. The guy's got some speed to him. He's got a little bit of range to him. And clearly, as you mentioned with the interception of Lamar Jackson on a tip, he's got the hands to play the role. So he's going to end up playing this season. But like we discussed at other positions, the guy who's the starter might be called the starter, but might actually get less playing time than his backup. a lot of it's going to be, especially on defense, the packages that Baltimore runs and what looks they're given by the offense. Harrison could end up getting a ton of playing time if teams feel like they're going to do a Derrick Henry and just run all over Baltimore. You want your thumper in there. You don't want L.J. Ford in there. At the same time, if you're going to go up against a team that has two tight ends and they're good pass catchers or a good slot guy or a good running back that can catch the ball in the backfield, Fort might be your guy. Flip side, you might only end up playing one linebacker most of the time. Anthony Levine might end up playing as that safety hybrid role. So neither one of them might end up getting a whole lot of playing time this year when you compare it to Patrick Queen. So to answer your question in the most roundabout way humanly possible, it's going to be Queen, and those other two guys are going to rotate with each other depending on what package it is. I would only label one as a starter, to be honest with you, and that's going to be Patrick Queen.
Nice. Well, we're really excited to see Patrick Queen get out there for sure, and Malik Harrison. I can't wait for that to start. So staying on the defense, Tyus Bowser has been apparently showing out in camp. Looks to have made some great progression. What's your take on his progress, and do you think that he can finally become the guy that the Ravens were envisioning would be the pass rusher opposite Judon?
Well, I don't think he'll ever become the guy that the Ravens maybe envisioned when they drafted him. Certainly year 4 is well, it's great to see it happen. Tad bit late. But at the same time, he has been doing very well. And we saw at the tail end of last season, he picked up more sacks. He was a little bit more of a consistent player overall. And we saw flashes through his first 2-3 years, really, of that guy that really could be a solid all-around outside linebacker. He can cover. He's got speed. He's got some pass rush moves. He just need to go ahead and have it all click and just become more consistent overall, become develop more moves, develop more counters, develop more football intelligence, develop just more in this system and know what's going on around him. Those things seem to have all clicked for him, and sometimes that happens for a guy in that 4th year. You look at Zadarius Smith as a prime example of that, a guy who, even going into that 4th year, you're like, oh, man, I hope he's able to go ahead and have it click. He does. He plays well for Baltimore, but then he goes over to Green Bay and is like the pass rusher in the NFL. So for some of these guys, it clicks a little bit later than others. And I think for Tyus Bowser, that's exactly what happened. It happened in his 4th year. Certainly, money is a good motivator. If he plays well, if he gets anywhere close to double-digit sacks, he's going to get paid next offseason. That's what's going to happen. Whether it be by the Ravens or someone else, he's going to get a good contract. So all of those things kind of factor in, and I do think that with them not addressing the position too much this year, it was really a fight between him and Jalen Ferguson for that other starting role. And then you have Pernell McPhee as kind of your insurance, as your guy who, look, if neither one of them do it, then at least we know we got McPhee. McPhee's going to be good for 7, 8, 9 sacks this season if he plays like he did last year and he's able to stay healthy. All right, if we get any worse than that, then we're in trouble and we're just going to have to blitz 60% of the time. But hopefully one of these guys plays up. And Tyus Bowser really does seem to have been that throughout training camp. Again, we'll see what happens in the regular season when he's not going up against the same guys every day. And if he's able to, again, become more consistent. But with no preseason action, it's kind of hard to really peg where he's actually at versus just maybe what's a training camp blip.
Yeah, that's a good point. And another guy we've been hearing a ton about in training camp is rookie wide receiver James Prochet. And apparently it's been a lot of the time he's making his name is when he's going up one-on-ones against some pretty darn good cornerbacks here in Baltimore. So do you see Prochet being the bigger contributor early on than Devin Duvernay, despite the fact that he was drafted after him?
I both do and don't. Again, I know that doesn't answer your question in the slightest, but I think right now, he's the player that's more primed for it. Certainly, you've got him as a return specialist. He's going to get on the field that way. He's been playing fantastic throughout training camp in that role, and it seems like they've kind of just given it to him now. They've given up all illusions of guys like Kenyon Barner becoming that guy. So he's going to get on the field that way. And as you mentioned, he's making some fantastic plays. He's got great hands. That I think 40, 50-yard reception where he dove for the football and caught it. Now, granted, it came back because technically it was a sack, but those are the types of things that you love to see out of a rookie wide receiver. Duvernay is the one that's getting all the name recognition because he was an earlier round pick. But when I talked to the guy that has been training Prochet this offseason, and Duvernay and a handful of other players this offseason, David Robinson, he said, look, don't sleep on Prochet. The guy might have been a 6th round pick, but he is impossible to cover underneath. He's got some sneaky speed to him. And he's a guy that if he gets the football in his hands can make guys miss. So do not sleep on the idea of Prochet maybe not starting off getting the most attention, but by the end of the season, if he plays like he has throughout training camp, he's going to develop more of a chemistry with Lamar Jackson. He's going to prove that he's the guy that, when you need a 3rd down and 3rd and 7, he's going to be the guy that's going to prove that he's got the hands and the ability to make those plays and catch the things underneath. All those things add up by week 8 to be a guy that you're focusing on as a quarterback, and that's the guy you end up going to. So certainly I think the ability is there for Prochet to ball out this year and outplay Duvernay. When you compare the two, maybe Duvernay has the better career overall, but Prochet right now is showing up NFL ready for week 1.
Yeah, it's going to be. It's just exciting to me to have prospects that are coming in that aren't injured in camp, that don't have mysterious injuries and don't have, as Glenn likes to say, like phone books for hands. I'm just excited to at least have that conversation. So we want to stay on the offense side of the ball and talk about the tight end room. We think that people are underestimating the value of the 3rd tight end because we had a premium there with Hayden Hurst. So right now it sounds like it's down to Eli Wolf and Jarrell Adams. How do you see that shaking out?
Well, I wouldn't forget about Patrick Ricard. I know he kind of plays some of everything. At a certain point, he's going to throw a pass. I'm just waiting for it. Ricard's been getting a lot of looks there as well, and he's kind of that like that weird fullback hybrid tight end / running back / potentially an offensive tackle at times. He kind of plays all of those roles really, really well, which means that Baltimore can kind of flex him all over the place. And don't be shocked if tight end is a spot where he actually gets a lot of looks this season. You've got an unproven guy in Eli Wolf who Baltimore really seems to like, but can he stay healthy? The answer throughout training camp is not really. He's now on his 2nd injury, a little tweak of what it looks like his hamstring this week. And before he was injured earlier in training camp and missed some time that way too. So Jarrell Adams is a guy who's a veteran, and again, the Ravens love their veterans when it comes to that stuff. They love the guys with experience, but it's a 3rd tight end role, so you don't necessarily have to have a guy who's been in the league for 4, 5, 6 years to play that role. You need a guy who can make plays. And if Eli Wolf can't stay healthy, then Patrick Ricard's proven he can make some plays. He's gotten in the end zone more than Nick Boyle did overall. So maybe that's your answer. You keep on a guy like Eli Wolf or Jarrell Adams just as a maybe a 4th tight end effectively, or Eli Wolf if you're going to go ahead and keep him on for a few years to develop him, and hopefully that turns into something along with Jacob Breland. But so far, Patrick Ricard seems to be the guy who might actually fit into that 3rd tight end role and not eat up a ton of receptions or targets for either Boyle or Mark Andrews, but still be able to be a serious contributor on all sides.
That's a good point. I think that was actually our follow-up, is to ask how Ricard would step into that role. So, yeah, that's very well said.
We got a twofer there.
Yeah, there you go. And as far as Lamar Jackson, we know it took 9 practices for him to throw his first interception. We also know he missed a couple with a groin injury that they were kind of being precautious with. But from all other accounts, he's looked great. He's loose out there. He's feeling good. He's looking good. What have you seen from Lamar that looks different this season from last?
Well, you mentioned the interceptions. You take some of that stuff with a giant grain of salt because it's training camp. You want to see where you can throw. Can I get away with this throw, or are NFL cornerbacks and safeties going to make a play on it? So some of that stuff, you take with a grain of salt. The fact that Lamar took 9 practices to throw his first one shows that maybe he's learned what he can get away with a little bit better than what he has his first 2 seasons. And as we've talked about before, it's those small things. It's knowing what you can get away with. It's knowing that, hey, I need to throw this football away in this situation that makes for a guy who maybe doesn't win an MVP, but wins a Super Bowl MVP. as much as I love Lamar Jackson on cover of Madden and the cover of magazines and all that stuff and doing all these commercials, I'd much rather have a third ring here in Baltimore than a copy of Madden, if I'm being real. So that's first and foremost, and you have to applaud that. Secondly, we've seen him make a concerted effort throughout training camp to do the deep ball. And he talked this offseason about it. He talked about how he was going to how he focused on that throughout the offseason with his quarterback coaches and how he trained for those things and how he thinks that the offense can really jump up the next level if he's able to better complete those deep balls. He's proven it throughout training camp. And again, those are the differences. It's small things, but those are the differences when you're able to go ahead and hit Marquise Brown downfield for 60 yards in a game when you need it, being able to play from behind when you need it. Those things equal more wins. Those things equal more playoff wins. That's the difference between an MVP quarterback and a Super Bowl quarterback. And so far, Lamar seems to be pointing himself in the right direction on that front, though the scrimmage gave maybe a slightly different story when things kind of got more toward preseason action.
Right. No, we're excited as well to see Lamar's progression and can't wait for the season to start. So, Matt, we appreciate you coming on the show. Always enjoy the time. I know that we've had you on before, so a lot of our folks might already know where they can find you. Why don't you let them know again where they can find the stuff you're working on?
Absolutely. You can catch me at Ravenswire at USA Today. It is ravenswire.usatoday.com. You can also catch me on Twitter at MatthewS_NFL, as well as here, apparently.
That's
so
right.
Just keep tuning in here, and you'll eventually get me again.
That's right. Well, thanks again, Matt, and have a good one.
Hey, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
No problem.